It's time for a new segment of Inclusion Unlimited. Today it is my pleasure to welcome Travis Davis, all the way from Albuquerque, New Mexico. He has a podcast called Off the Crutch. He has given one TEDx talk, and he's scheduled to give a second one later this year in Austin. He is also passionate about inclusion and changing the way people think about those who have a disability. Welcome, Travis.
Thank you so much for having me, Leslie. It's
Thanks
a pleasure.
for being here all the way from Albuquerque, New Mexico. How's the weather in Albuquerque?
It's pretty cold right now.
I bet it is. I bet it is. Let's talk first of all about your diagnosis.
Yes, so I was born with cerebral palsy, and specifically I have what's called spastic diplegia, which means I have muscle tightness and I have trouble walking and with my balance. So I use forearm crutches, and for longer distances, I use a wheelchair.
Now, you were actually born with several disabilities, weren't you?
So I had a hole in my heart when I was born as well, and so I had open heart surgery. I was in the hospital for about 6 months right after that, and then the doctors also diagnosed me with hydrocephalus. So I have what's called a shunt that helps regulate the brain fluid in my head, so it doesn't just stay up there, and it is able to get into.
And with that, don't you have to replace the shunts as your brain grows and as you grow?
Yeah, so I've had it replaced one time, I believe, when I was in 4th grade, but I haven't had any issues since.
Tell me about living with a disability. I mean, you were born with cerebral palsy, so that's all you know. How did you adjust to life with these disabilities?
So I think I've been able to adapt in a way that allows me to see the world through a unique perspective, and I really don't let my disability prevent me from doing anything, and I just try to live my life one day at a time, and whatever I can do to help other people learn about disabilities or even have a conversation about inclusion, that's what I'm all about.
What do you want people to know? Like, for people who don't have a disability, because you're trying to make this world more inclusive, as we are as well, but what is the message you have for people?
I think the message is not being afraid to ask questions, not being afraid to engage with somebody with a disability, and just understand that regardless if you have a physical disability, an intellectual disability, developmental, anything of the sort, because we all have something that we go through, just come at the person with empathy and understanding, and try to not let someone's differences affect the way that you perceive them, because we all struggle with something. And for someone like me, you can clearly see it's visible.
When did you become such a public advocate?
I would say it started in undergrad when 3 friends that I had met on campus had approached me about starting a student organization that raised awareness for people with disabilities.
And these 3 students that you met, they did not have a disability.
They did not, no. They had knocked on my door right like the day after I met them, and came up with a bunch of ways that they wanted to help me. And I thought that that was so cool and unique that they would approach somebody that they had just met about wanting to increase inclusion on campus and have these conversations about disabilities and help other students on campus with disabilities.
I love that so much. Let's talk about your podcast, Off the Crutch. When did you start that? And if people listen to it, what can they expect to hear?
Sure. So I started it in 2020, right when the pandemic was happening. I've always been interested in audio recording and getting my message out there. So I thought that this was a perfect time and opportunity for me to start a podcast. And it took me a while to come up with the name Off the Crutch, but once I kind of thought about, well, I use crutches, and instead of calling it Off the Cuff, I'll call it Off the Crutch. That kind of put really things in motion. And I think people can expect to hear my experiences living with a disability, but also people who are also in the disability community that are resilient, that go through struggles, that also are impacting the community at large, and not just the community where I live in Albuquerque, but their own community, because the podcast has allowed me to interview and get to know people that are making a huge impact on a grander scale. And so I just love hearing people's stories and getting to know what they've gone through and how they are making a difference.
Now, you are a very educated man. You not only graduated from college, you got your master's degree as well?
Yes. So my bachelor's is in English, and then my master's is in adapted physical education. And during that time period, I was also coaching a wheelchair basketball team, which is something that's near and dear to my heart because I grew up playing wheelchair basketball, and that was the time that I started making friends with other people with disabilities, because up until about 12 years old, I didn't know anybody else with a disability. It was just me. And so being able to play wheelchair basketball and then to coach years later was a full circle moment for me.
That's so fabulous and fascinating. How do you like working with the kids?
It was a great experience for me because, growing up until I started playing wheelchair basketball, I didn't have a mentor or anybody that I looked up to with a disability. So my coach was really a really important figure in my life and taught me how to not let your disability hold you back and do the things that you want to do. So for me to give back in that way and to see my players grow up into young adults was really really special to me.
And very rewarding, it
Yes.
sounds like. So your podcast, you talk about the struggles and the triumphs that you have and others. What about experiences you have? How easy it is to travel or things that you go, can you share some of that with us?
Yes, of course. So back in September was my first time ever visiting Austin, and I highlighted it on an episode about what it was like to spend 9 days, by myself, kind of traveling on my own and navigating a city that I've never experienced before. And, I think every city has challenges with accessibility, but I was able to look at it from my lens of traveling with a wheelchair, and then coming back in October was just like another experience for me. But I think going to a place that I've never gone to, like Austin, and kind of seeing what that city has to offer was really cool to talk about it on my podcast for then people that either live in Austin or even thinking about going there, was a way to highlight the city, but then also talk about like the great programs and organizations specifically with the disability community that Austin has to offer.
What do you want people to know on how they can help make this world more accessible?
I think it starts with asking questions, being curious, and being kind, because I spend a lot of time talking to elementary school students. And one of the questions I ask is why is it important that I'm here talking to you now as a second grader? And what I want them to come away with is that when they get older, they're going to be in positions of power that are going to be able to positively impact other people with disabilities. They'll be like politicians, teachers, CEOs, HR directors, every different profession. And so if they learn from a young age about disabilities and have these conversations, hopefully when they're 19, 20, 21 years old, they may remember that one time that they had with somebody on crutches or in a wheelchair that came and spoke to their class, and they're like, wow, yeah, now I'm making a difference. And so it's all about that transfer of knowledge to me.
And so it's so important to start at a young age to make sure that children see and are around and interact with individuals of all differing abilities, because they make a difference. And it also makes a difference probably to how they treat people in school when they are kids, which is important. You are such a pleasure. Thank you so much for being with us for Inclusion Unlimited today. Off the Crutch is what it's called.
Yes.
Check out his podcast. Thanks again. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Leslie.
And as always, thank you for joining us. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share, and help us make this world more inclusive for people of all abilities.